Human Rights Commission launching a new social media charter. The idea is that it's a way to guide what you say or what you don't say on social media, particularly things like Twitter. I suppose the real issue really, let's be honest, is that Twitter so often ends up displaying prejudice, so often ends up just being really quite a toxic environment. Zanyiwe Nthatisi-Asare is the CEO of Digitally Legal. She joins us now. Zanyiwe, good afternoon to you. We all know that social media can end up just being terrible, hugely toxic. If you want to draw up a charter like this, where do you start?
So I think, look, the fact that this has been drawn up by the South African Human Rights Commission is a good stance. I think it's important to look at the history of South Africa before we even discuss this. Remember, social media is just a platform for people to air the thoughts and the views that they have. In the physical world, and we've got this. So if we know, we definitely are a country that has the potential of overcoming racial prejudice. If you take it all the way back to the Cadessa days, South Africa had both black and white people, and I guess people of all sorts, sitting down and looking at ways of balancing ways to get to a democratic status. So we definitely have that potential. However, I do believe that as time went by, that got watered down because all stakeholders within the democratic ecosystem of South Africa, I don't think have really put their weight behind what it means to be in a democratic, equal, and equitable society. So looking at a charter of this nature really brings us back to what we stand for as a country. And maybe if you give me the opportunity just to look at what South Africa did and why we are the beacon of hope globally. If you look at Cadessa specifically, South Africa had the potential without the intervention of a lot of big bodies like the UN, the AU, and back when Commonwealth was not under the UN, to sit down as South Africans, both black, white, and I guess non-white, and mutually agree on a way forward. So this, for me, really tells me that we're looking at digital mediums and saying that let's bring back the glory of South Africa and that harmony through social media platforms, but also keeping people accountable and responsible.
I sometimes wonder if the problem with social media is that people forget they're actually talking to another human being. So they forget that they're people. And what I'm saying is that people will say things to each other on Twitter through words on their phone, which they would never say to their face. They wouldn't say it on a phone. I mean, I've been in lots of politically tense situations in my life. I've mediated lots of difficult debates, and none of them have ever got to the level of insult and vitriol and prejudice that you see on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that level or that sense of being anonymous behind the screen has given people the kind of courage that, like you said, they'd never exhibit or portray in the physical world or physical realm. However, you know, if you look at the Cyber Crimes Act, there are provisions that allow people to be traced, even if you think that your user, you know, you won't be found. But I think this also brings another element to this conversation, the things that people say to each other. So a lot of this has really been institutionalized and normalized. So if you look at the workplace and you look at a lot of the dismissals that are based, that are connected to social media abuse or uses, it has to do with a lot of that, the things that people say to each other. So that really illustrates a level of, I think, dehumanizing each other, one, but also a lack of humility for each other within the South African context, which takes me back to, I think, the efforts that we had in '94, at least the interim constitution, going into South Africa have really been watered down. And initiatives such as the social media charter really speak to us, you know, getting it together. I mean, we've got the 21st of March coming up, Human Rights Day. And one of the things that I always think about year in, year out, is how, you know, days like Human Rights Day or days like, Human Rights Day specifically, have been seen as sort of like a bride day or a day to hang out and to chill. But a country with the kind of history that we have as citizens, we actually need to look at introspecting and investing more in talking about these things, creating forums to co-create solutions, because we do have a serious problem on the ground in South Africa.
So if we all followed this policy, would it change things? I mean, what for you would be the main points of this policy that it'll make a difference?
So what I like about this policy is the human approach. And I think, Stephen, you and I have had multiple conversations about this when I speak about literacy, when I speak about awareness, and when I speak about making it bite-sized and easily accessible, right, to the common man on the ground, common woman on the ground, common child on the ground. You know, we're not looking for people who are lecturers at universities, lawyers, judges. No, we want the everyday person. Now, what this particular framework does is it breaks down what harmful expression is, it breaks down what defamation is, what harassment, what bullying is, but it does it in a very user-friendly manner. And then what it also does is this charter, I think, not only speaks about it, but it creates a guideline that can be implemented in the workplace, that can be implemented at schools, and I believe should actually be infused in the life orientation subject in schools, so that young children can understand this. But also when it comes to labor relations within the country, where we do find institutionalized racism, and I think even just media platforms where people might want to put through certain types of content, we look at infusing elements of this charter to ensure that when information is being sent out, people are very responsible and aware, because this has really been put in a very human-centric, understandable manner.
I think a lot of companies try and draw up a Twitter or social media policy, and it's quite difficult, you know. I know that you're a professional in this. I mean, you could say that I deal with ideas and issues around society all the time. I sort of have a vague idea, almost said to behave as a human being on Twitter, but let me not say that. What I'm trying to get to is to create a charter for a company is probably quite difficult. Could you use this charter? Could you say to all of your employees, listen, this is the thing to follow. If you don't, we're going to fire you.
So I think it certainly does create a good framework, a guideline for people to create, well, a charter, a policy. I think people would call it more of a social media policy that is utilized within the work environment. So it definitely sets it out in an easily followable manner. And look, no two organizations are the same, so you don't just copy and paste it. You ensure that you look at the type of people within your organization, the nuances of your labor base or your labor force, and ensure that, you know, the vulnerable members within your group, whether it's LGBTI, whether it's people living with disabilities, you know, this is not just about race, this is about overall prejudice, and ensuring that social media is not a platform for people within your work environment or your employee base to abuse one another, and ensuring that you don't just put it out there, but you take time to teach them, to have, whether it's a trainer session, whether it is a workshop, so people leave there understanding exactly what this charter as a guide intends, and also ensuring that your labor force signs for it, so that if it ever does go to CCMA, you as an employer are covered because you've done your bit to ensure that this information is trickled down from the very top to the bottom, or bottom to the top of your employee base.
Would it help if we all just took a breath and remembered that the person that we're sending this out to is also a human being in the end? You don't need a charter to do that.
To be very honest, Stephen, when I look at South Africa as a whole, I feel the whole lot of us need a hug. The country has gone through a lot of trauma, and I think we need to really approach this with honesty. We have been quite ugly to each other over the past couple of years, and I believe if we can use days like Heritage Day, where we now call it Bride Day, which I think is a bit ridiculous, or days like Human Rights Day, where we also want to put pieces of meat on brides. Instead of doing that, if we can just be honest and try invest on what the purpose of the day is, to ensure that we're speaking about human rights and we're acting upon it. And we also from, let's say, Heritage Day perspective, understanding that we're in a country where blackness was erased and we adopted identity that was anti-black, that we actually need to look beyond, you know, this smiling and the niceties and acting all politically correct, and being very honest and saying that we do have a racism and prejudice problem in our country, and we need to face it and not hide behind brides.
Zanyiwe, thank you very much indeed.